So I just had my 30th birthday. In the past few days, I've found myself reflecting back on my 20s and all the life-changing lessons I've learned that continue to guide my life even today. I decided I wanted to put together a list of the 10 greatest insights that I've taken from my 20s, the past 10 years, and share it with you in hopes that maybe they'll be as invaluable to you as they have been to me. Lesson number 1, never get married. To your opinions and ideas. Never get married to your opinions and ideas. What I mean is, don't allow yourself to fall so in love or get attached to an opinion or idea that you don't allow yourself to consider other pieces of information. Don't fall in love with your opinions and ideas. See, what I've learned is that doing that, it just puts you into a type of echo chamber where you're hearing your own thoughts and opinions that you already have bouncing back at you. And you kind of cut yourself off from growing or allowing for the possibility of learning something new. For example, when I was a teenager, you couldn't tell me anything about being a vegetarian. I love bacon, I love pork, I love meat, and I was already athletic and full of energy and at the top of my game, so I didn't want to hear anything that would go against that. But in my 20s, I learned this lesson about not getting married to ideas, so I became open to learning more information and hearing more opinions. And although I'm not yet convinced to take meat completely out of my diet, I have been convinced for probably 10 years now to stop eating pork, to cut out red meat, and the fact that the average person really could benefit from consuming much less meat than they currently do. So the lesson here is that no matter how sure you are about anything, it's always to your benefit to consider what's being said, even if you instinctively disagree, because the last thing you want to do is cut yourself off from being corrected. See, too many times I've found myself working so hard to defend my current level of understanding, when what I should have done is went on the offense and fought intentionally to learn more, to hear more opinions, to improve my current level of understanding. See, there's always a cost when you learn something new, and that cost is accepting that your old understanding was incomplete. I mean, ask yourself, if you had an opinion that was actually incorrect, wouldn't you want to know? Or would you prefer to live in your ignorance? See, for me, I want to know. So I had to change my way. I had to implement this lesson into my life. Lesson number 2, a moderate routine is better than an occasional extreme. Whether it's with your health, your finances, your relationships, it's so much more easier and effective to have a good routine to maintain them than it is to work harder, but during short stints of motivation, trying to improve them. When I was growing up, even deep into my 20s admittedly, I always found it to be such a pain in the ass using those floss strings, right? And so I didn't do it. I never flossed my teeth, or very, very rarely did I floss my teeth. I brushed, didn't floss. And then so I'd go to the dentist, of course, and surprise, surprise, I'd have a cavity. And then I decided, okay, I'm gonna floss really hard, but I only did it occasionally. And then surprise, surprise, go to the dentist, I still have more cavities. And then I found the magic of those floss sticks. And they were so much more easier for me to use, and I was able to create a routine around it. And then of course now I no longer fear going to the dentist. 2 books that really brought this idea home for me is called The Compound Effect and The Slight Edge. Basically both books talk about how even small, consistent daily habits over time can lead you to either a life of desire or a life of disaster, and how important it is to be aware of your habits, good or bad. It's easier to maintain strong joints and good health by putting in a little bit of activity every day than it is trying to recover your health by working really, really hard in short periods to undo the damage that has already been done. Lesson number 3, death is the ultimate reality check. One day, you're gonna take a breath, and that breath will be your last. See, what I found is reflecting on my own mortality is the one thing I can always count on, the one thing I can always turn to for a slap in the face. Sometimes I do it on purpose, and sometimes it happens unexpectedly. Like when someone that has had an impact on you or that you've always valued passes away. Obviously, like friends and family, or even like for me recently when Kobe Bryant died, that had a certain impact on me because of what he meant to me growing up and the culture and his mindset. I learned about the natural law of impermanence. It's a philosophy that basically states that no form holds forever. No matter how successful a business is, it won't hold forever. No matter how strong a material is, it's not going to hold forever. Even no matter how critical and important a thing is to life, it won't hold forever. Don't rely on a real death to remind you that next year isn't promised, that the next day isn't promised. Because the reality is, All of our lives have a number to it, and it's counting down, and we just don't know what that number is. The funny thing is, we all know we're gonna die, and sometimes I wonder if we really believe it, because if we did, we'd be probably living a little bit differently. So anytime I need to re-energize myself, to take action on the things that I've always wanted to do, to live life in the moment, to live today, I remember this lesson. Lesson number 4, life is not a fairy tale. Now, this was an important lesson to me because the truth is, people's lives don't just magically work out. As teenagers, we're optimistic about the future. Rightfully so, teenagers should be. But the truth is, a lot of people are living lives that are nowhere near what they expected it to be. In my 20s, I got my first taste of adult life and seeing what my life could and would look like if I didn't commit to making a change. I worked dozens of jobs, worked at factories, making very low income, working around people that were absolutely miserable coming into work every day, and have done so for 40 years. I saw what it was to live a life that you weren't happy about. It only took me a few years of doing that to realize that that could be me. That could be my life if I didn't do something about it. And I refuse to let that happen. See, a lot of people, they rely on their future self to do the work necessary to make them happy and to make a change. They say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, I'll do it next week, next month, next year. As if they believe the fairy tales and movies where no matter what happens, things just magically work themselves out. That's not how it works. That's not how any of it works. Don't find yourself waking up one day with regrets and old age about what you didn't do. We don't have a right to a happy ending. We gotta work for it. Lesson number 5. Everyone's got challenges. See the human in people. Sometimes we forget that each person we see, all 8 billion people out there, have a life just as complex, just as vivid, just as complicated and challenging as our own. And there's actually a word for this realization that I learned. It's called sonder. We get so wrapped up in our own lives, understandably so because we are the center of our own lives. We only experience our life from our own perspective. That it's easy to become desensitized and forget that everyone else has their own world that they're the center of. And we forget that they're kind of real sometimes. Like, we know they're real, but we don't really know they're real. It's kind of like watching a movie or playing a video game, and it's just those extras walking on the side of the street. As simple and obvious as this lesson is, it's helped me become more empathetic over time because it allows me to realize the definite struggles and challenges that next person I'm walking by is facing. That cute couple that you always find yourself envying, they're going through a divorce. That rich guy you're always, he's got life made. He's got brain cancer. That person that you work with that always seems so miserable and you kind of get put off by them, both their parents just died in a car crash. There's a saying that there isn't anybody you couldn't learn to love if you just heard their story. And in my 20s, I've really started to open myself up to listening. Lesson number 6. There's power in asking why. If I had to title my 20s, it would be Adrian Questions Everything. The first 20 years of our lives, we're basically just walking along a predefined path. Between our parents and school, we're being told what to do and what to think for the most part. But once adulthood begins, we're basically free to do what we want and create our own path, right? And sometimes, at that moment, we reflect on what the previous generations have taught us, and we realize that maybe it's not right for us. I felt like my 20s were kind of like the second coming of childhood, because over and over again in my head, I'm asking myself, why? And maybe that's what adulthood is for everyone. I found myself questioning common traditions, like religion, celebrating holidays, having kids, marriage, buying a house, drinking alcohol. Alcohol? Like, alcohol tastes so bad to me, I don't understand the benefit and the allure of it. I'm not gonna do it just because everyone else is doing it. I was constantly questioning why. Why am I doing this? Embracing the power of why has set me up along this path of learning so much about myself and about the world around me. And I think for a lot of people, the world would really open up if they just embraced asking that simple question more often. Why? Lesson number 7. There's no such thing as a true identity. Now, this is one of the most meaningful lessons I've learned because once you acknowledge and accept that a true identity doesn't exist, it opens up the opportunity for you to make positive changes in your life and no longer be limited by the things that you were once identified with. See, what I've learned is that identity is nothing more than the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, whether real or made up. And this changes every day, bit by bit, along with our experiences. Now, there's a tremendous amount of things that contribute to how we view ourselves, but probably the strongest one being how we believe other people view us. Now, see, the problem with this is every single person you know, and even the people you don't know, has a different view of who you are. Every single person has a different view. And none of the people you know, not your family, not your friends, not the closest people in your life, have the same view of you as you have of yourself. Once you develop that self-awareness that your identity is always changing, that there's no such thing as a true identity, then you can start letting go and releasing those old stories you had about yourself that might have been holding you back. And then implement real positive self-talk, changing the way you talk to yourself about yourself, instead of having your words act more as a curse that holds you back from living the life that you actually want and being the person that you actually want. Some things that have helped me develop my understanding of myself are books like The Power of Now and A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, I think that's how you say his name, and people and speakers like Tony Robbins and Bob Proctor, and attending workshops and events and seminars like the Landmark Forum. I'm just a big fan of this concept of identity and understanding yourself, and I can talk about it all day, so let's get on to the next lesson. Lesson number 8. Ideas without execution don't mean shit. So let me ask you, have you ever had a really great idea, and then like 10 years later, you see somebody else getting rich off of that business or getting recognized for that idea, and then they're all like, man, that was my idea. I thought of that 10 years ago. I could have been rich. That should be me. It's like, yeah, well, maybe it wasn't you though, because you didn't do anything with it, right? Any monkey can come up with an idea. The hard part is executing it. I've had so many ideas. That's been me. And it's like, no, that invention that you thought of, somebody else created it and they put in the time to make it happen. You just thought about it and you did nothing. You deserve nothing. During my 20s, I found myself identifying as the person who learns a lot of things and knows a lot of stuff. After a few years of that in adulthood, I realized it's not getting me anywhere. It's pointless just knowing things. So then I changed my mindset. I started to identify as a person who works hard and gets things done. I stopped learning so much and I balanced it out equally with taking action. Ideas without execution don't mean shit. Lesson number 9, always have a strong reference. And I'm not talking about a reference for work. I'm talking about a mental tool that can be used to help you during the hard times. What I eventually realized is that anytime I have something to do that seems challenging, it becomes significantly easier if I can reference a time in my head that I've did something similar that was harder. For example, making these videos is kind of hard. It takes between 15 and 20 hours usually. But anytime I get that thought about how hard this is, I immediately reference my experience in college where we would get assignments to research and complete a paper that's 40 pages long. And so comparing that to this, suddenly making these videos becomes a lot more easier. Sometimes I'll actually purposely take on very difficult challenges for no other reason than to have a strong reference that I can use in the future during hard times. If you've followed me for any length of time, you might know that I have a personal challenges playlist where I challenge myself and make videos documenting and sharing these challenges that I put myself through. Like my video about taking cold showers or going 5 days without food. These videos created a very strong reference that I can use as a mental tool to reflect on when I need it in the future. Like anytime I find myself being hesitant to do something because I'm worried about what people might think about me, I reflect on the last video I made where I wrote out a list of all my insecurities. All of a sudden, doing that thing that I was hesitant to do becomes a lot easier because I've already done the most embarrassing thing I could do. I shared all my deep insecurities with the world around me. So realizing the power of having strong mental references kind of allows you to hack your own mind. And sometimes you can do that even with other people's experiences. Although it's best to have your own experiences because it hits harder, you know? Lesson number 10. There's more pleasure in wanting than there is in having. You know how kids will talk for months about wanting a toy? And then they finally get it and they're happy, but then they play with it a couple times, and then they see the next commercial come on and they're like, I want it. And then they forget about the first one. It's kind of silly, right? But we do that as adults too. We have our eyes on that new iPhone 17 and we're like, yo, I want that. And then you finally get it. And then that dopamine hit almost immediately wears off after you've used it for like 10 minutes. And then it's just a normal part of your day. And then 6 months later, that new Samsung X22 comes out, and all of a sudden it's just a new cycle over and over again. See, what I learned is that our minds can't actually tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. Our body reacts chemically the same way. That's why when you book a trip, you feel so much pleasure and joy just thinking about the trip. Your mind doesn't know that it's not real yet. It thinks it's real in that moment. And there's nothing wrong with having things. I mean, I certainly do. This is more of a lesson in self-awareness than it is a rule for having or buying things. Learning this in a way led me into the concept of minimalism and being less of a consumer of things that don't have a whole lot of value outside of simply getting them. Focusing more on what's important and less on what's not important. And speaking about what's not important, John C. Maxwell has this quote that I've always loved. He says, "It's difficult to overstate the unimportance of practically everything." Now, this definitely isn't a list of all the lessons and insights I've learned in my 20s. If I was making a video on that, we'd be here all day, all year. But these are the top 10 insights that I think can apply to anybody and allow you to change your life, or at least your outlook on life, the same way it's done for me. So question for you, what is one valuable lesson or insight that you've taken from your past 10 years? Whether it was in your 20s like me, or any other decade of your life, let me know at least one insight you've taken from the past 10 years down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. That's probably the easiest and most effective way to support me and the channel right now. You know how it works. The YouTube algorithm will pick it up, show it to more people. They'll love it. Everybody wins. I'd appreciate that. You know, I really am looking forward to my 30s. I can't imagine all the new lessons and insights that I'm going to learn. And you can be sure I'll be making some videos about it as I go along. Hope you have a great day. I appreciate you watching.